Apex Express, Asian Pacific Expression.
Community and cultural coverage.
Music and calendar.
New visions and voices.
Coming to you with an Asian Pacific Islander point of view.
It's time to get on board the Apex Express.
Welcome to Apex Express. I'm your host, Miko Lee, and tonight we get to hear the podcast from Dr. Robyn Rodriguez called Spitting Fire. And I'm so excited for you to listen to it. Check it out. And if you want to hear more, we're going to link in the show notes an earlier interview I did with Dr. Robyn Rodriguez. So please listen to Spitting Fire with Dr. Robyn.
I can't actually remember a specific episode when my parents or my Lola, who helped raise me, explicitly said, "Don't stay out in the sun." But I always knew, growing up, that staying out in the sun was something I shouldn't do because being dark was something to be avoided. I remember being embarrassed by my mom, who would bust out an umbrella on a bright and shiny day. "Mom, it's not even raining outside," I remember complaining. I hated the big hats she would wear or insist I wear, or the comments of, "You're getting darker," also in a disapproving tone. I remember, too, the high praises anyone with lighter skin was heaped, even when I didn't think they were that particularly attractive. Or how if my relatives knew someone was going to be marrying an American, basically a white person, they would exclaim, "Oh, they're going to have beautiful children." When I brought home a hapa, a dude who was Filipino and white, I was told that if we got married, I would be improving the race. I've always known, whether I can remember being told, "Don't stay out in the sun," that if there was a skin hue to aspire to, it was to be light. To be called mestiza was to receive one of the best compliments. To be a mestiza is always already to be beautiful. Of course, if anyone said I was mestiza, it was always qualified as mestizang morena. That is, someone who exhibits certain types of physical traits that are associated with a mestiza, like having a more pointed nose or being slightly taller than the average Pinay, but not the lighter skin of a genuine mestiza. So that's why I was sometimes called mestizang morena. Still meant as a compliment. After all, I could still enjoy the privilege of being associated with mestizaje, but only partially. So many Filipinas in the diaspora, especially those of us who live in white settler colonial societies like what we now know as the United States, as well as Canada, so many of us share experiences similar to the ones I've experienced. My dear friend and colleague, a fellow sociologist, Dr. Connolly De Leon, who currently teaches at Ryerson University in Canada, made this shared experience a topic of study in her book chapter, Mas Maputi Ako Sa'yo, I'm Lighter Than You, the spatial politics of intra-racial colorism among Filipina-Filipino youth in the Greater Toronto area. It was a chapter that was part of the very historic anthology Filipinos in Canada, Disturbing Invisibility, edited by Roland Coloma, Bonnie McElhenney, Ethel Dongohan, John Paul Katungol, and Lisa M. Davidson, and it was published in 2012. Now, I've taught Dr. De Leon's chapter, Connolly's chapter, in my Filipino American experience courses in the past, and it's always deeply resonated with my Filipina students. In Dr. De Leon's chapter, she starts off with a quote that so many of us are familiar with in some way. She writes, quote, "You're so dark." Yuck! My cousin would say to me in disgust as she would place her forearm beside mine to compare her light skin to my dark skin, end quote. Dr. De Leon continues, quote, as early as the age of 4, I was taught to feel ashamed of my complexion. I did not understand what was so shameful about being the particular shade of brown that I was, end quote. The shaming that Dr. De Leon and so many of us experience comes from colorism, which scholars define as the discriminatory treatment of individuals falling within the same racial group on the basis of skin color. On this episode of Spitting Fire, Doctora Robyn Speaks, you'll actually hear less from me and more from yet another friend and colleague, Dr. Joanne Rondilia, who I recently hosted as part of a lecture series jointly sponsored by the Bolosan Cente for Filipinic Studies, of which I serve as the founding faculty director, and the School for Liberating Education, my platform for offering Filipinx or Filipinos and ethnic studies courses that are often only available to those who happen to be able to get accepted into the 4-year, often elite institutions where they are taught. It's where I get to teach all of these amazing courses that I think all of us should have to the broader community. Dr. Rondilia has researched on colorism in the Philippines and the diaspora for over a decade. It was the topic of her 2012 dissertation, which was entitled Colonial Faces, Beauty and Skin Color Hierarchy in the Philippines and the United States. In her 2007 book, co-edited with Paul Spickard, entitled Is Lighter Better? Skin Tone Discrimination Among Asian Americans, she explores colorism as a phenomenon that not only plagues Filipinos, but Asian Americans actually more broadly. So now I'm going to turn to Dr. Rondilia and her lecture entitled Don't Stay Out in the Sun, Understanding Filipinx and Colorism. Go ahead, Joanne, take it away. So happy you're here.
All right. Thank you so much, Robyn. It's do you mind if I call you Robyn? Should I call you Dr. Robyn?
Oh my God. Boy, you only know me as Robyn.
I will call you Robyn, but everybody else, you are required to call her Dr. Robyn, Queen Robyn. You know, that's how. But it's such a joy to be here. You know, before we open the doors, Robyn and I were talking about, you know, what it is to be an academic and the type of language and spaces in which we share our research. And I think one of the things that's really hard, especially for the soul of a lot of academics, is that it's so rare for us to really share our research with the community, right? Because I don't think of myself as a researcher. I think of myself more as a storyteller, right? And I think that that's really when I have students who refuse to like engage in research, I try to remind them like research is not, I don't think of research as sort of like the white person's game. I think of research as something that is connected to us. And it's our birthright, it's our ancestral birthright, right? Because storytelling is our ancestral birthright. And that's the lens in which I come into to exploring this issue of colorism. So show of hands for those of you in the room, I'm curious to know how many of you were told this, don't stay out in the sun or else you'll get too dark. How many of you were raised with that sort of mantra? Yes, right. I almost feel like these words are so quintessential to the Filipino experience or the Filipinx experience. Like, don't stay out in the sun or else you'll get too dark. And I'm someone I was born and raised on Guam. And so everybody on Guam is dark because we are always out in the sun, right? And my mother is very light-skinned. She came from a middle-class family from San Pablo City in the Philippines. My father's from Lucena, and he grew up poor and was raised by a single mother. And so there was this definite class difference between my parents, but there's also a skin tone difference between my parents. Like my dad was someone who was very, very kuripot. He was very cheap, but he had this great love for my mother. And I think part of that was he saw her as like, this wonderful like prize almost, because she came from a well-to-do family. And, when they got married, her family did not want them to get married because he was not wealthy, but he was someone who, because he worked on Guam as an engineer for the government of Guam and the US military, like that sort of, and he had, I think in total, like 13 deeds to his name. That's sort of what eased my mother's family into, being supportive of their marriage. But there was, and on my mother's side of the family, this is a family, and mind you, I love them very much, but this is a family that values beauty a lot, right? My mom and my aunties were all some form of provincial beauty queen. And so this is why me, my brother, and my sister were always told, don't stay out in the sun or you'll get too dark, because the idea was you had to preserve whatever it was our mother gave us, right? Even though, even though like members of her family say didn't necessarily find us attractive, the idea was like, as children of this woman, or as members of this particular family, you had to sort of preserve yourself. So as a young kid growing up on Guam, I always wanted to go swimming because my neighbors across the street, actually, one of them represented the island of Guam during the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, right? So I always wanted to go swimming. I wanted to learn swimming, but my mother wouldn't let me because I would get too dark. And so that, there was so much of our lives that were limited because of this need to preserve beauty. And this is how I entered the research, the exploration of colorism. So very quickly, for those of you who do not know what colorism is, simply put, colorism is a looks-based or, physical look, a looks-based system of discrimination where light skin and Eurocentric features are favored over darker skin and non-Eurocentric features. These discriminations typically occur within the same racial or ethnic community. The term colorism was coined by the writer Alice Walker. And when she first started writing about colorism, she was talking about colorism in a very intimate way. She was talking about the way in which lighter skinned Black women evoked pain, right? Onto darker skinned Black women. And so this is where she comes up with this term called colorism. Colorism is intimate. It happens within the same racial or ethnic group, typically. And the reason why I say typically is because in our society, we live in a very colorist society. So I'm sure some of you, and you can throw up reactions, some of you know people, maybe related to people who say, I'm not a racist. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I love Black people. I listen to Beyonce. Halle Berry's my favorite actress. They'll go on and on and on about how they're not racist. But when you look at the patterns of what they deem is attractive or sort of civilized among the Black or African American community, they always resort to people who tend to be like lighter skinned, right? And that's also a way that colorism manifests itself. It starts in the intimate space, but it manifests itself in a much larger, in a much larger sphere. So for the Filipinx community, when we look at popular culture, right? And I don't know if any of you have heard of the show or are watching a show called The Cleaning Lady. It's a new show that was, it just premiered last week through Fox. And The Cleaning Lady, the reason why this is really big for the Filipinx community is because it originally was supposed to be a Filipino storyline, right? And it was a way to sort of introduce, Filipinx characters in the public sphere. But what happened was Shannon Sossamon, the actress Shannon Sossamon, was originally slated to play the main character, who is an undocumented Filipina maid, right? But something happened during the initial table read, so they end up casting Elodie Young, who's French Cambodian. So they changed the character a little bit, but when you look at the setting, it's set in Los Angeles. It's really a Filipino family. And my argument when I look at popular media and colorism is that oftentimes in popular media, when they're trying to introduce Filipinx characters, it's done through the mixed race body. It's done through a mixed race person, right? So for those of you who may be familiar with Shannon Sossamon, she's mixed race. She's a mixed race Filipina, but she's very white passing. And it's usually mixed race white passing or mixed race white pleasing, what I call white pleasing Filipinos, that popular culture suddenly becomes interested in us, right? And that's what we see in a show like The Cleaning Lady. In the next few months, I think Joe Coy is going to have a movie called, I think it's called Easter Sunday. And again, Joe Coy, very Filipino, right? It's ingrained in his comedy. But what allows his fame to happen in the United States is that he's very white passing and white pleasing, very different from someone like a Rex Navarrete, whose career is much longer, right, than someone like a Joe Coy, right? So there's definitely colorism at play, right? But when we're looking at the intimate spaces, the way colorism plays out in the Filipinx community, it's the lighter skinned Filipino discriminating against the darker skinned Filipino. In the Asian American community, it's the Chinese person discriminating against the Cambodian person, right? So there's these different levels of colorism at play. Colorism, it's important to know that colorism is the discriminatory system that makes anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism exist. It actually maintains anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism. And the reason why this is important is, one, when we look at anti-Black racism, and you're hearing this a lot, either in academic circles or even in more popular conversations, I feel that it's important to talk about anti-Black racism in conjunction with anti-Indigenous racism, because they happen hand in hand. And when we look at the founding of the United States, for example, the founding of this country happens through the genocide of Indigenous peoples, as well as the enslavement of African peoples. So they're not separate, they come together. And so when we're looking at colorism, the system of colorism, right? Colorism is what allows anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism to exist. What makes, and we see this through the different colonial periods of the Philippines. There's something very distinct about colorism in the Filipinx community, and it really has to do with our colonial history. And so on the worksheet, there's just a very sort of like quick and dirty kind of list of like these three major periods of colonization in the Philippines. What I really want to point to is the role of the Chinese throughout these historical periods in the Philippines. Because typically when you talk about colorism, colorism is most prevalent in the African American community in the Black diaspora. But there's something very distinct about Filipinx colorism, and it's that our notion of lightness is defined by Eurocentric standards of beauty, right? And this is because of Spanish colonization. But it's also defined by Chinese standards of beauty or East Asian standards of beauty. And this is because of the positioning of the Chinese throughout these colonial periods. Because the Chinese historically were the merchant class, they were often elevated above indigenous Filipinos, right? And so that's why today in the Philippines, when you see people who are in power and you look at the mixed race or mestizo, the mixed race people who are in power in the Philippines, they're often mixed race Chinese, right? And that's because of the legacy and the presence of Chinese in the Philippines. And so it's the history of the Chinese in the Philippines, these notions of Chinese lightness that really make colorism in the Philippines and among Filipinx very distinct. It's a very distinct conversation. I wanted to pause and say, if you have any questions or if I'm going too quickly, feel free to, put this in the chat and I will try to address it as I go along. At the beginning of the talk, I asked how many of you were told don't stay out in the sun. And for those of you who said that you were told this, by show of hands, how many of you heard this in the context of family? How many of you were told this in the context of friends or any other intimate setting? Because oftentimes these messages are circulated among the family. And so and again, like colorism, relative to racism, colorism has there is this intimate aspect, because oftentimes how we understand our own value and our own self-worth has to do with the messages that are articulated in the family, right? So one of the interviews that I had conducted was with this woman who, when I conducted the interview, this was in the Philippines, and she worked in the entertainment industry in the Philippines. And she had talked about how her Lola would address her and her cousins. So the woman I interviewed, very light skin, light eyes, light hair, and that's why she's an entertainer in the Philippines. She's a model, and at the time she was hosting a television show. And she said that growing up, her Lola always called her Miss Universe, right? And it was because of the way that she looked. Her Lola would call her cousin, who was like Spanish mestiza. So this person who I called Tyler was Miss Universe. Her cousin was Miss Philippines because she was mestiza. And then Tyler's sister was Miss Cebu. So here, and this is very blatant, and I'm not saying that all families are like this, but here you have this very explicit example of a Lola articulating the differences between these three young girls: Queen of the Universe, Queen of the Philippines, Queen of the Province. And in her interview, Tyler had said, yeah, it was very clear that Lola had her favorites. And it was in the way that she designated you in this spectrum of like these sort of beauty queen titles, right? In another interview that I had conducted there, and this was an interview here in the United States, in the research I called her Milen. Milen talked about how whenever there was a dance or prom or something like that, there was this whole process of, her and her brothers having to go to Lola's house so that Lola could see, what everyone was wearing and that there could be pictures. But what was very clear was Milen's youngest brother was clear, her words were, he was clearly not a favorite. And this was largely because he was darker. He was often omitted from the photos. Lola didn't really care about what he was wearing and things like that. She always put attention to Milen, who was very light-skinned, and her two brothers who are also very light-skinned. So there's a very central role in which the family plays in how we understand colorism and how we understand personal value. And so as I was exploring this, in sociology, there's a term called the beauty queue. And the beauty queue is a system of classification. It's a societal system of classification that classifies women from lightest to dark, to, from most valuable to least valuable. And so what I did using this theory that Margaret Hunter she wrote about, I added to this conversation by talking about the intimate beauty queue, because the beauty queue itself is about a societal structure, but the intimate beauty queue is how we understand our value, how our notions of beauty are created in the most intimate spaces. And the reason why this is important to look at is because I think each and every one of us we can look at the TV and we can look at societal messages and say, yes, that's how society understands beauty, but that's not me because I'm my own person. But in the intimate space among family and friends, when you're getting the messages that you're not beautiful or you're not valuable, and it's coming from an unconditional love space, such as the family, therein lies the problem and why colorism is such an intimate issue, because these are messages that are articulated by people, usually by people that you love or by people that you're closest to. There is a gendered aspect to colorism. Women in families are often seen as being more responsible for, for beauty or engaging in beauty practices over men. However, men do, there is some pressure from men. When we look at colorism in popular media, again, in the US sphere, the few chances we get to see Filipinos or Filipinx in popular media, they are oftentimes light-skinned mixed race people, such as, and again, the example of the cleaning lady. We have the example of Joe Coy and his future projects. It's not until we get into the independent sphere that we can see more variation. But when major institutions such as a Fox Network or Netflix is trying to introduce a public to the Filipinx community, they're going to go with what they feel is safe. And it's usually someone who's light-skinned, someone who is white passing, someone who's white pleasing, right? There is something about the way in which popular media uses the mixed race person or the mixed race body. When you look at skin lightening advertisements, oftentimes it's a mixed race person that is being used to model such products. This is I think it's over 10 years ago now. There is a company in the Philippines called Glutamax. And when they launched their line, they used a mixed race Black Filipina model named Jinky Oda. And what they did was they showed the sort of before and after. And one of the taglines in the advertisement in Tagalog, it said, "You could be white like me," because it showed this progression of her being dark-skinned and then being light-skinned. And again, like here for this particular product, you're seeing the usage of that progression. It harks to very old beauty advertisements that sold products specifically to Black women, especially skin lightening products to Black women. So there's a way in which the mixed race person is often used to sell beauty, to sell product, to sell us our notions of lightness. Having said that, I'm not trying to demonize the mixed race person. I don't think it's fair to, I do not think it's fair to, for example, boycott Joe Coy because he's so fair, right? Or yes, I love that comment, how we lift up Olivia Rodrigo, but our love for her or Sweetie is fairly limited. Exactly. like I don't want to attack the person, but if you're light, you cannot, you have to recognize the amount of privilege that you have, right? And then when we're looking at skin lightening products, again, like this is a global, this is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. In 2018, it was valued at 8.3 billion. 2022, those numbers have gone up. And as of late, there has been a lot of talk about skin lightening products for various reasons. Globally, it's because that market is so high. But here in the United States, this has become an issue because skin lightening products and the usage and sale of skin lightening products has actually reached our policies. So for example, the CARES Act, because of the work of Ilhan Omar in the CARES Act, what was able to happen was the enforcement of the usage of a particular ingredient called hydroquinone. So this ingredient, it's a derivative of mercury, which is very harmful to the skin. This is a very popular ingredient that is used by a lot of skincare professionals. Now there's an enforcement about how you can buy or have access to this particular ingredient. So skin lightening products and the conversation about skin lightening products has been a huge issue as of late. I want to end with two thoughts, and it's this. I want you to reflect, and I know this was a lot of me talking. I want you to reflect on the way in which we articulate ideas of colorism on a daily basis. I want you to think about, just a few weeks ago, for those of you who may have gathered with family, what are the ways in which you've heard these, certain ideas about colorism articulated? It's often, oh, this person is so beautiful. Sometimes there's a comparison of children. Sometimes when you're greeted by the people you love, there's comments about, oh, how dark or light you've gotten. Included in the conversations about colorism is body size, how much weight you have or have not lost. This is all part of the colorism conversation. There's a way in which we articulate ideas of colorism on a daily basis. I want you to reflect on the beauty practices that we engage in. If we, if I dye my hair blonde, or if I wear, green contacts, what is my reason behind it? Is it because I want to engage in a sense of play? Or is it because I'm trying to escape a part of my identity, right? These are important questions for us to ask, because these are the daily, everyday ways that we we contribute to these ideas of colorism. And that, I believe, is connected to the everyday practice of anti-racism, right? It's important to understand that there's no end, because with respect to colorism, this is a systemic issue. And so what we have to do is tackle it piece by piece. Sometimes it's about the practices that we engage in individually, but it's also about the way in which we engage with the people around us. With respect to colorism, because it's so intimate, right? It's about having the hard conversations with the people that we love the most, right? Our friends and family.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Rondilia. I actually have a question. I'm wondering, Joanne, do you feel, especially with increasingly more kind of mixed race, especially kind of Black and Filipinx figures, in popular culture, is your sense that there is a shifting around colorism or not?
I think that there's small shifts, right? So I think of, and I'm looking at the comment, the magandang morenex, and then also, we do have the Black and Filipinx sort of mixed race entertainers like her and Salidi. Also, there's some notable athletes that are Black and Filipinx. Like, I think of I think of their popularity as moments as opposed to actual like movements, right? And the reason being is because white supremacy is so prevalent. It's going to take so much to dismantle that system, right? The magnitude of white supremacy is beyond anything that we can, we can quantify, right? And so I think of I think of something like the Magandang Morenix movement. I think that they're important. I think of them more as moments because, and it's not because they're not powerful, it's because white supremacy is just so prevalent, right? And so, and I don't mean to be the pessimist in that, I think the way we move forward is to do the heart and soul work, right? To do the anti-racist work, to recognize the ways in which we contribute to anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, but to make the conscious decision that this is gonna, I'm going to work towards eradicating it, while knowing that eradication may not happen in your lifetime. And I'd hate to be the pessimist, it's not gonna happen in our lifetimes. But our jobs right now is to plant the seeds towards that vision, right? It's to plant the seeds to make these moments the actual movement, to make it so overwhelming to white supremacist systems that white supremacist systems have no choice but to go away. But it takes so much seed planting.
So, Joanne, it looks like there's two questions that are sort of interrelated, and both, I think you probably saw them, kind of connect with concretely, some ideas around or strategies around addressing both colorism and anti-Blackness in the intimate space of the family or among friends, and et cetera.
Okay, think that is an excellent question and something that I have grappled with and, is very close to my heart. The first thing I'll say is there's no easy way to bring this up with family and friends, right? Especially, in our families, especially in our respective families. Your moms and dads, your Lolas, you know them and they're hella stubborn, right? And so the advice that I have is this: it's impossible to change someone's mind. What you can do is model certain behavior, right? What you can do is model certain language, right? And that alone will speak volumes, because you are not going to change, maybe you're not going to change like your Lolo or Lola's mind, but the people around you are listening. And so here's an example, right? For me, especially in having these conversations with my mom, because she's very much the driving force for a lot of the research that I do. I know my mom, and I know that if I make her feel like crap, like if I make her feel stupid, or if I make her feel like what she's saying is old and antiquated, I know that I'm not going to get through to her. So what I had to do with my mom was create a love language of understanding, right? Because by creating a love language of understanding the ways in which some of her comments have hurt me, when I started to actually honestly articulate my pain, it's not that my mom let go of some of these ideas, but she started to create an understanding of the impact of her words. And what that did was it changed the way she wouldn't say the things she would say. She wouldn't tell me how dark I was. She wouldn't make comments about me being fat or whatever, right? Because she understood the impact of that. And as I started to realize okay, we may not come to an agreement, but there's a love language that we can speak to. That's how I started seeing changes in the way that we interact, right? And so you can't change someone's ideas, but what you can do is plant seeds and really stand your ground in terms of how you feel about certain ideas, right? but you have to do that in a love language, because Filipinos, the language we speak is love, right? So that I think that's what's important. You have to understand that you may not change someone's mind, but you're also making it so that the people around are listening. Because I see the way that like my nieces and nephews, they have such a better way of dealing with my mom when she would say terrible racist things, right? They had a better way of communicating with her and articulating their frustration and their anger. And it would change. It may not have always changed my mother's ideas, but it definitely changed her behavior and it changed her consciousness. And I think that that's all we can really do, is develop that love language.
And if I may, if I can just also add, I think what you said is absolutely spot on and really resonates, Joanne. And I would add also, I think that there's something really important about how these broader social movements can also become so important. I mean, so just in my own family, my eldest was biracial, Black and Filipino. And of course, having a biracial grandson didn't necessarily mean that my mother could also grapple with her own deep anti-Blackness. And it was always a struggle. And I agree with Joanne. Sometimes, it is really understanding the particularities of your own dynamic with specific intimates in your circle, and understanding that certain kinds of love languages open up possibilities for conversation, whereas other approaches close off. But I do have to say, my mother, is going to be 79. It really took all the movements that happened in response to the George Floyd murder. It took all of the movements around anti-Asian hate for my mother for the very first time. And this is I'm her daughter. I've been teaching around race and talking about race. I produced a biracial grandson for her, right? And we could never have real frank conversations about white supremacy, could not really touch it. There was a way that my mother didn't want to name white supremacy as something that actually shaped her life. And, those are really, there may be complicated reasons for that, but being able to name that was always really, really hard. Talking about anti-Blackness was hard, but all of those movements did something for her. And it shifted things in ways that I thought were going to be impossible by the time, in her period of life. And not only was she able to have some real kind of honest conversations, that she actually became a kind of advocate, and then used her own platforms to start conversations about white supremacy and kind of race in our communities. So I guess that's to say that it's not entirely hopeless. I think it is true. Change can be slow. It can be incremental. It comes in these gentle kinds of ways over time that require a lot of love and patience. And couple that with, I think, also kind of these movements that are also equally important to grow, that together that you can see change is really absolutely possible. So, just to kind of share that, but it is, it's so hard because even within a family where there are biracial family members, right, that isn't itself even going to necessarily change, even when they have, right, a loved one that ought to be challenging that for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, another thing that helped me, especially, like with my mom. So when I did the research, I did spend some time in the Philippines and my mom came with me, right? So seeing my mom's very light-skinned, Filipina navigate the Philippines. And so I just want to say for the record, I know I look really light and it's because we're in COVID and your girl has not had some sun. Okay. just so that, because I'm looking at, I'm like, God, yeah. I know I look light, I swear, I'll show you pictures, but, I didn't, at the time when my mom came with me to the Philippines, I did not realize how important it was for me to observe her in the Philippines, because I was able to get these glimpses of my mom before she was a mom, right? And I was able to understand, like, okay, like, so one of the sort of things that I learned was like, all these hurtful things that like my mom would say to me about the way that I look and what have you. I learned that part of the reason why she leaned in so hard with me is because when we would travel, like go around to like malls or whatever in the Philippines, people would always tell her, oh my gosh, like your daughter looks just like you. And like if my mom were sitting next to me, and you can see this in like photos with the two of us, like she's very vanilla, and next to her I look like burnt caramel. And I think that there was something about the embodiment of my body size, because I'm big, and my darker skin tone. It's almost like I was the physical embodiment of everything that she had feared and everything that she was told you should not. And for her, it was confronting, like I gave birth to this person who's everything that that I was told was wrong, right? And so I think I like just watching her navigate, I began to understand like the context in which she was raised. I started to understand the messaging that she was given, because when I finished the dissertation, I felt like I finished the dissertation at a place where I could actually forgive my mother for all the things that she would say about me. I could forgive her for like the comments that she would make, because all those things that she imposed onto me was a product of her own pain. And I was able to have something that she did not have, which is a sense of healing. Because until her very last breath, she was so trapped by these notions of beauty. She was so trapped by needing to be beautiful, because this was the constant messaging that she was given, right? And so what we can offer, and the way that we engage in our sense of healing, especially with the people that we love, really comes down to, I know that when my mom left the world, I planted all the seeds that I needed to plant in her. Right? I know that I have this healing, something that she could not have. I know that her grandchildren don't have to suffer the pain that she did. So I think understanding our family, right? Understanding like, the people, our family and friends, understanding them in that respect, putting into context the reason why they do the painful things we do, choosing the way in which we heal from the things that they did to us. That's all we can really do, right? And all of this, I think, and I'd hate to sound so cheesy, but all of this is encased in like this deep, profound sense of the love that we have for ourselves, the love that we have for each other, in the midst of confronting immense colonial legacies that time and time again tell us that we are not worth it, right? If we can find that light, and if we can find that value, and if we can share that value with the people around us, that's all we can really do.
Joanne. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
You don't have to apologize. I think that's one thing about this space, Bolosan space, the School for Liberating Education, is we all do this out of deep, deep, deep love, right? That's the whole purpose of being able to host, to create space like this, to share space like this. We all know people like you, me, those of us who chose this path into academia. We didn't do this because we wanted to produce knowledge for an institution that wasn't built for and by us, but it was precisely to produce knowledge that could heal and liberate our people. And so, so appropriate for you to feel all of those feelings. And that's why it was so important to have you here, because this is such, for so many of us, a deeply, deeply hurtful kind of, we struggle with this. And I think what I what's so valuable, what you bring to the table is it's so much more complicated than the colorism. There are all of the ways in which colorism intersects with class, intersects with body. I mean, even the whole notion of like the magandang morenax. I mean, that there are even these fine distinctions that exist in the Philippines about the morenang mestiza, like that was like the way that I would get like weirdly like sideways complimented, like, oh, she's a morenang mestiza though, what does that mean? But, our bodies are subject to such scrutiny within at least that context. And even in this context, right, we're actually dealing with multiple contexts, right? Contexts, Filipinx folks in the diaspora, where our bodies are subject to examination and evaluation every single day. And we subject it ourselves also, our bodies to the valuations all the time. And, and we do this work because we're trying to find, a way out, right? A way to heal all those bits of hurt and brokenness. And, thank you so much, Joanne, for not just sharing your amazing research, but also your heart with us. And I think I can feel that people came away with from today with just that much more just healing. And, that's the point. That is why we do what we do here. That's why we created the Bolosan Center and why I launched the School for Liberating Education. This is the reason why we do this. And so with that, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. And, really invite everyone to continue to follow the work that we're doing at the Bolosan Center, what we're doing at the School for Liberating Education. The next major thing actually is next week. So my next book is coming out on Asian American activism. It's actually really cool to talk about coming full circle, Joanne, because basically this is a collab between our old professor, when we were undergrads at UC Santa Barbara. Diane Fujin and I ended up collaborating on a couple things, and this is the latest collab, which is an anthology on Asian American activism. And one of the things I'm doing is launching a mini course on Asian American activism that's based on the book, but also stuff I've done on activism. So next week, I guess on Thursday, we're officially launching the new the registration for the new course. And so we're launching it with this conversation I have with Art Nelson Concordia, who is the godfather of ethnic studies in the K through 12 system, basically the Ninong of ethnic studies in K through 12, was one of the key authors for the ethnic studies model curriculum and does ethnic studies work at Santa Barbara, actually, also with Diane. So anyway, that's coming up next week. But do keep following, the work that we're doing. This is, such important work, supporting our scholars and our artists, our community historians. And again, thank you so much, Joanne. I'm really excited we have our real conversation. One of the projects I always wanted to do is
Yes,
a podcast that gets real,
yes.
like let's really
just
talk
so you
about
know,
those real stories.
You're looking at like 25 years of friendship. So I know lots of Robyn secrets. I have lots of pictures because I was very good at documenting these things.
Did that photo shoot? I think you did the before and after of my eyebrows.
I have a photo of you like in a like a face mask.
Yes. You can.
So,
if I look this good coming on 50, it's because Joanne taught me about makeup and skincare regimens.
Well, I'm gonna launch a course on like skincare.
Oh my God!
Skincare after your 30s.
No, seriously, I'm about to launch. I'm not even joking. I'm totally launching a whole journey to 50. So y'all can come because I'm getting there. As of the week after next, it's T minus 365 days to 50. So join in the fun. Anyway, Joanne, it's so great to see you. I wish I could give you a big hug. God, I
well,
can't
we'll see
wait
each
to,
other
like,
soon, hopefully.
really break bread with you because,
Yes.
I always know I eat well when I'm with you. Like, I
Yes.
still dream about the ice cream, that homemade ice cream we made. Like, nothing compares ever again to the ice cream that I consumed that you made. So thanks again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank
everyone.
you.
Please check out our website, kpfa.org/program/Apex Express, to find out more about our show and our guests tonight. We thank all of you listeners out there. Keep resisting, keep organizing, keep creating and sharing your visions with the world because your voices are important. Apex Express is produced by Ayame Keen Lee, Anuj Vaida, Cheryl Trong, Isabel Lee, Jelena Keen Lee, Miko Lee, Miata Tan, Preeti Magala Shakar, and Swati Rayasam. Tonight's show was produced by me, Miko Lee, and edited by Ayame Keen Lee. Have a great night.
Hello, I'm Susan Young, Chair of the Pacifica Foundation Board of Directors. One of the exciting things happening across Pacifica is our national news service. Every weekday, we're bringing together stories and reporting from across our network, giving listeners a broader perspective of what's happening around the country and the world. It's another way Pacifica fulfills its mission of providing independent journalism and thoughtful coverage of the issues that matter most to our communities. We get to hear from longshoremen in Oakland, a nurse in the Bronx, a farm worker in Ruidoso, a screenwriter in LA, and a school teacher in Washington, D.C. We can hear their own lives reflected back with dignity and depth.
Base Command, all systems go. We are go for launch. This is when KPFA music takes over. Raw, eclectic, real. No playlist algorithms, no corporate formatting. Just sound that moves, shifts, and surprises. Jazz bleeding into cumbia. folk crashing into noise, the underground rising to the surface. No two nights are ever the same on KPFA. Throttle up. This night has no ceiling. Find your groove at 94.1 FM, kpfa.org.
KPFA broadcast engaged, holding steady.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, everywhere at kpfa.org.